we're turning the military into a grand social experiment rather than into the most lethal fighting force on planet Earth. Do you understand that the more lethal a military is, the less likely it is that it will have to actually put that lethality to work? So we actually save lives, both lives of our troops and lives of lots of people overseas, by having an extremely combat capable military, because a military like that, nobody wants to mess with them. Because if you do, someone else will raise your children. And so it's sort of inversely not just bad for America, but even bad for lots of people around the world, because we will probably end up having to kill a lot more people at some point because they have been taught not to respect us. Our allies have been shown over and over again that we will throw them under the bus in a heartbeat. We will abandon them at their hour of need. And that encourages those who would be bad actors on the world stage. America used to be the world's policeman. But if the world's policeman isn't carrying a gun, but is wearing a tutu, it's kind of hard to be worried about him. It's kind of hard to respect him. I remember back, I don't know, it must have been about 2012. I was from 2005 or so all the way to 2014. I was going to Iraq and Afghanistan for a couple months every year. And it was just, like clockwork. I was doing my own deployments over there to cover the wars, going with Oliver North or going for CBN News, whoever. And so I would parachute in there and see how things were going, but I wasn't there on a day-to-day basis. I was just there a couple times a year. And when you're there as a journalist, you kind of get treated like a general or something, because you're not just staying in one place doing one mission. You're actually going around and seeing a lot of different places and a lot of different people doing their missions. And so you're getting a better sense of what's the overall feeling of how things are going in the war. And about 2012, I came home and I said, we're going to lose this thing. We're going to lose this war. We're throwing it away. And I started telling people that, and that was not a popular sentiment at that time. Up until that point, I thought, maybe we can pull this out. Maybe we can win this. But as time went on, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, just like on and on and on. And I started to see the growth of bureaucracy in Afghanistan, just like a cancer. The bureaucracy just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And I realized we're not going to win this because we're not here to win it. At one point in Iraq, there were something like 39 generals in the headquarters in Iraq at one time. 39 generals. If you added up all those generals and their staffs, their water boy and the guy that makes the coffee and his aide and his other aide and his third aide and all of those kind of people, the little clerks and jerks that follow the generals around. If you added up all of the staff and the generals, it was literally a brigade-size element. Thousands of people. I mean, mind-boggling. If Winston Churchill or George Patton had been alive and had been taken to Iraq or Afghanistan at that time of the war, the first thing they would have done would have been to fire 3/4 of everybody in the headquarters element, put a rifle in their hands and send them out on the front line. The war in Afghanistan became not about winning or beating the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. it became a giant machine for cranking out promotions for our officers. See, there were tons of officers that really didn't want the war to end because they wanted to get their combat command in, and you got to do that as a lieutenant. Then you got to do it as a captain, as a company commander. Then you got to do it as a battalion commander. Then you got to do it as a brigade commander. And so there's got to be some combat somewhere. And this was a perfect opportunity for a whole lot of people to get their combat experience in and therefore get their promotions. We used to call it the greater flagpole theory. It was like the more flagpoles that they put up in Afghanistan, the stupider everything got. And if we had had good leadership that would have stopped that mission creep from happening, we would have lost fewer men, we would have ended the war. All we had to do was put some people over there who had the capacity to take down the bad guys, and the special ops guys certainly did, and then take the handcuffs off and let them go. Let them do what they had to do. This is not anything new. The fact that they could have gotten the job done with far fewer people is, any student of history would have known that. He points out that in Sierra Leone in the late 1990s, there was a private military contractor called Executive Outcomes. I remember reading about that when I was in school. Executive Outcomes used 200 people to restore order in Sierra Leone within 6 months. Then, after they had everything nailed down, the U.S. State Department stepped in and said, yeah, we can't have mercenaries doing that. They blocked them from being able to do that, led by Susan Rice. And because she said it was racist. Do you think this is new? This is in the 1990s. Susan Rice said it was racist because Executive Outcomes were mostly mercenaries from South Africa and places like that. And so then they sent in 11,000 UN peacekeepers, which cost over $1 billion a year, and the violence came right back. The 11,000 peacekeepers apparently weren't able to keep the peace, probably because most of them came from a place where there isn't peace. In 1994, during the Rwandan genocide, 1 million Tutsis were killed within 4 months. That's 8,000 people a day. And the U.S. government had a proposal from Executive Outcomes to intervene and do what they had done in Sierra Leone, and the U.S. State Department turned them down, and the slaughter continued and never actually got a whole lot better. After 9/11, this is what I've been talking about. A handful of CIA and Green Berets went into Afghanistan, and within a matter of literally weeks, like 6-8 weeks, had defeated the Taliban, overthrown the Taliban. And they did it by partnering with the Taliban's natural enemies in that region, giving them a bunch of cash and a couple $1,000,000, and boom. You know what they were buying their loyalty with in a lot of cases? Viagra. They had boxes of Viagra, and they were handing it out to the old 60-something warlords in Afghanistan, and it was changing their lives. And so they were buying their loyalty with an ED pill, the little blue pill. Is there anything that little blue pill can't do, I guess? So instead, the United States said that, well, okay, we got a better idea now that we've already overthrown the Taliban. We're going to put 120,000 troops in there. And we just created an insurgency out of thin air. There probably would not have been an insurgency if we had just left, at that point, left the Northern Alliance in charge, said, you guys rebuild your country any way you want, just don't be a threat to us. See ya. And we could have got out of Afghanistan with just a handful of casualties, and the whole war would have been over. We overthrew the government of Saddam Hussein in a matter of hours, and it took us longer than that to actually find him, but found him, and he was deposed in like just a couple days. But then what did we do? Big army showed up and surged in, tens of thousands of troops at an unfathomable cost, and created the conditions for a perfect insurgency out of thin air. And again, we could have just done what I've been saying, which is to simply say, okay, we got rid of your bad leaders. You guys rebuild it however you like. And if you become a threat to us, we will come in and curb stomp you once again. And we can keep playing this game as long as you want. But just not stay.